Hello everybody, welcome blockchain club powered by Alior. So we here at the space of Alior Accelerator, and today I would like to introduce you to Mr. Rikiya Masuda, CFO of bitFlyer. He's the executive of the biggest Japanese cryptocurrency exchange, and today he will talk about bitFlyer business and about regulations, about also the in-house blockchain that bitFlyer develops. So, floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and first of all, thank you so much for today, giving me this opportunity to introduce about bitFlyer and also our proprietary blockchain technology, EMEA. So this is Rikiya Masuda, and I'm mainly in charge of European business of bitFlyer as co-head and CFO of bitFlyer EU. So we are now currently based in Luxembourg, and we are operating under the license granted by Financial Ministry of Luxembourg. And we are now expanding our business within the EU under the passporting of license. So to today's presentation, I will briefly explain about bitFlyer, and then also I will talk about the regulatory overview, and then also what exactly the regulation for cryptocurrency exchange means. And then in the end, I will also introduce EMEA, which is our proprietary blockchain technology and service. So actually, bitFlyer is the only exchange who operates under the regulation across 3 continents. So we founded our company in 2014 in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, and then now we are registered as a virtual currency exchange by JFSA, Japan Financial Service Authority. And then not only that, we already receive, we are now operating more than 45 states in the US. And also we received a license from New York, which is a New York bit license. And then here in Europe, we received the payment institution license from Luxembourg. And then actually, although bitFlyer's brand awareness in Europe is still quite like a small role, but actually in Japan, we are the biggest player in the market with more than 90% market share. And we have more than 2 million users, and then our monthly trading volume recently was like a $60 billion worth of Bitcoin. And we operate as a cryptocurrency exchange. We operate 2 different platforms. One is called Lightning, which is dedicated for professional traders. So as you can see, a bit, how to say, it's a bit complicated user interface, but which is dedicated for professional users, so that you can see a chart or how market moves, and then also which allows you to place a complicated order, and so that maximizes your experience. But at the same time, we also offer a simplified version of user interface and experience for more beginner users. So for this service, we also offer sort of like over-the-counter trading. So we as a counterpart of the trade, we will offer a 2-way price, buy price, sell price, so that a user can buy or sell cryptocurrency with a very easy user interface and instantly. And not only exchange, we also offer a blockchain product called EMEA, which is our proprietary blockchain technology. And then actually it is already used by so-called mega banks in Japan, the 3 largest banks in Japan, for their proof of concept projects to replace the existing banking network with blockchain. And then also we are featured on TechCrunch for this project. And I will come back to this point later. But let me talk about the global regulatory overview first. So first of all, since we are a Japanese company, I would like to explain what happened in Japan's market over time. So as I said, we founded bitFlyer in 2014, but right after our inception, there is a huge incident happened, which is called Mt. Gox incident. I think many of you have heard of the company called Mt. Gox, but by the Mt. Gox is actually by then biggest cryptocurrency exchange at that moment, which was incorporated in Japan. And then unfortunately, they got hacked and then lost huge amounts of money. Then that kind of created awareness to the market and Bitcoin, and then also raised some concern from the regulators. And by realizing the necessity to regulate this industry, the founder of bitFlyer, Yuzo Kano, also created a self-regulatory organization called JBA, and then started lobbying activity to the Japanese regulator to create appropriate regulation to the industry. And then thanks to those efforts, in Japan, we actually now have a specific regulation which regulates the cryptocurrency activity, so which is called the so-called virtual currency law, but more precisely, this is an amendment of the existing Payment Act, and that was enacted into April 2017. Sorry, May 2017. And thanks to those new law and regulation, the actual usage of Bitcoin was increased in Japan. And then a lot of merchants, including some of the biggest electronics retail or like a travel agents, they started to accept Bitcoin as a payment method. So you can actually buy some TVs or washing machine or whatever in the biggest electronics retail in Japan. And also you can go travel, like going to Hawaii, purchase your plane ticket, just buy Bitcoin. That is now possible in Japan. And after that, after they created the virtual currency law, they started, they officially registered the 11 virtual currency exchange, and then bitFlyer was one of the exchanges we received the license first. And so since right after we created, or Japan regulator created this law, the actual stance of regulators towards the industry was quite supportive. So they understand this is a startup market, we are not perfect, so they're encouraging those existing players to be more compliant. But unfortunately, in the early 2018, we again experienced a quite serious incident, which is called CoinCheck incident. So the CoinCheck was one of the biggest player in Japan, actually the second biggest player in Japan, but they got hacked in and lost 500 million US dollar worth of Bitcoin. Then of course that raised a concern from the regulator even more. Then most of the exchange in Japan, including bitFlyer, unfortunately received the business improvement order, and then those exchanges are now working hard to improve the operation to be more secure and compliant. So that's the overview of the history of a Japan market. But at that time, Japan was actually the first one who created the virtual currency specific law. Then interesting features in Japan as the cryptocurrencies are legally defined as virtual currency. Although it doesn't mean that virtual currency is recognized as a legal tender, but now specifically the virtual currency got the definition as a virtual currency and regulated as the form of payment method. So that's why the virtual currency, so-called virtual currency law is in the Payment Act in Japanese law. So in order for any company to operate cryptocurrency exchange in Japan, and that requires registration with JFSA, and they say that there are more than 100 applications already waiting for the approval. But as you can imagine, like due to the incident we had recently, now it's becoming more and more difficult to receive the license in the market. Then how about in Europe? So although we say bitFlyer EU received a license as payment institution in Luxembourg, and we are passporting this license to all across the EU so that we can operate our operation across the EU. But the actual approach, there are multiple different approaches to regulate this industry depending on the country. So, as I said, Luxembourg and then also UK took a similar approach to regulate cryptocurrency activity. So their approach was to use existing legal framework and then apply those existing legal framework to the cryptocurrency exchange activity. So the license we received is payment institutions. So technically speaking, this is a regulation to regulate the payment activity and not cryptocurrency. And at this moment, there's no EU level crypto-specific regulation. So technically speaking, the cryptocurrency exchange part, cryptocurrency part itself is outside of the regulation or outside of the scope of the regulation. But simply by the fact that exchange, cryptocurrency exchange, which especially provides the fiat currency to cryptocurrency exchange, they do need to hold the customer funds, and then also they need to facilitate the payment using the fiat currency to purchase Bitcoin. So that specific activity should be fall under the regulation. So that's why Luxembourg government decided to use the payment institution license to regulate this business. And then also UK, they took a slightly different approach, but quite similar, and they issued EMIs, like e-money institution license, and the now Coinbase just granted the license. But these two licenses are quite similar. However, if you look at some other jurisdictions which are known to be quite active to promote this industry, to encourage people to come to the country, like Malta and Gibraltar, they created their own regulation to regulate these countries. So, and then by creating the cryptocurrency specific regulations or law, and they kind of invite a lot of cryptocurrency players to their country. But an important fact we need to mention is these legal frameworks are not harmonized at EU level. So technically speaking, even if you get licensed in that specific jurisdiction, this is not, the passporting of the license in the EU is not applicable to these. So to what extent you will be allowed to market your product outside of the jurisdiction is still kind of questionable. And if you look at the US, see, US is, so we received a bit license from New York, but as you know, there are like 50 different jurisdictions in US. So every state applies different approach to that. So, but at the same time, the US SEC, they announce how they approach to the so-called ICO projects. And what they do is they will look at the characteristics of the project, and then their concern is whether the project should be considered as a security type of project. So then they will look at some features of the project, like is it open source, or is the project used by many people, or are the kind of participants to the system on a voluntary basis, or they get paid. Depending on these features, some of the ICO or many of the ICO projects may need to be considered as a security token project, which requires security type license, like broker-dealer type of license. So although Japan already have a specific regulation for cryptocurrency exchange, but at the same time, the legal framework to the ICO projects are not yet well defined. So we still need to apply existing legal framework for the different type of ICOs. So although the Japan government is also aware of this problem and working on the new regulatory framework, but at this moment, if you want to do ICO in Japan, and then you need to be careful of that different rules or existing legal framework may be applied, depending on the scheme of the project. So you need to pay attention, you need to be careful about how you structure the project in Japan. And depending on the scheme of the project, you may need to follow the existing legal framework. And if you look at the different countries like China, Korea, they entirely banned the ICO project. And then US regulators tend to consider ICO project as security. But then Europe, the ICO framework, regulatory framework for ICO is still under discussion. So I heard it's currently drafted, but at this moment there's no existing legal framework for ICO projects. So which means that we need to follow the existing legal regulatory frameworks for each country. So what does being regulated exactly mean? As a financial institution, there are multiple different things we need to be careful. And then as a regulated cryptocurrency exchange, we need to be compliant, and we need to follow multiple different fields like consumer protections and market integrity, financial stability, governance, EMEA CFO obligation. These are the examples of the things we need to pay attention to. And then we are actually doing a lot of things to be compliant or to be more secure exchange. Then why do we need to bother these regulations? Because cryptocurrency is, as I said, in many countries, maybe outside of the existing legal framework, especially in EU. There's no specific regulation for cryptocurrency exchange. But at the same time, what we need to be aware of is it is important to mention one thing. There are two different types of cryptocurrency exchange. One type is actually a fiat to crypto exchange, which bitFlyer is, who provides exchange between fiat currency, so-called fiat currency, which is dollars or euro, and cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum and so on and so forth. Then there is another type of cryptocurrency exchange which only provides cryptocurrency to cryptocurrency exchange. And especially for those who provide a fiat to cryptocurrency exchange, one of the most important thing we need to be careful is about anti-money laundering, because we are the gateway to the existing financial system from cryptocurrency world. And then by the fact that holding the fiat currency, or by the fact that handling the fiat currency to purchase Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, this part is supposed to be regulated by the existing legal framework. But another thing we need to be careful is, even for those who only handle cryptocurrency, which may be outside of the existing legal framework, that in Europe there is a directive called the AMLD, Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which covers not only financial institutions, but any kind of industry. So even for those who operate only cryptocurrency exchange, they are still subject to anti-money laundering directives or regulation. And to emphasize the importance of AML CFT, counter-terrorist financing, I would like to use this chart to explain one incident happened in Japan, or in this industry. So this is a chart to explain how the money flows from different place to different place. And then here it says like Mount Gox, which I explained in the beginning. So Mount Gox is cryptocurrency exchange. We lost the customers' money due to the hacking. But thanks to the characteristics or strength of blockchain, you can actually trace how the money flows from somewhere to somewhere. So these are the amounts who Mt. Gox lost by the hacking incident. But if we look at the flow down to here, you will find one exchange. I think it was run by a Russia or Ukraine, I'm not sure. But this is also, they were providing fiat to cryptocurrency exchange without any regulation, and then maybe they were not doing proper KYC as a result. But large portion of the stolen money actually ended up being in here, which were providing the crypto to fiat exchange. Then all the money laundered across this process was exchanged to fiat and went to somebody else. So they were actually the gateway from the cryptocurrency to the fiat currency world. And since they were not following the EMEA regulation, one of the founder of this company just got arrested due to the breach of EMEA regulation. So not the risk surrounding cryptocurrency exchange is not only about hacking, or not only about money laundering, but also so multiple different risks. We are exposed to multiple different risks. And if you look at the market, unfortunately, more than 30 exchanges experienced the hacking and lost their funds. So in order to prevent those hackings, we need to implement multiple different control methods. So if we take an example of bitFlyer, we store more than 80% of customer funds in the so-called cold wallet, so which is separated from the online environment. And then we also make an effort to minimize all the transactions happening from the online hot wallet to offline cold wallet. And then we also implement a technical measure called multi-signature to avoid the hacking. But not only that, we also implemented a proper governance structure and internal controls, such as internal audit or external audit, to realize the proper control within the company. And then also we received regulatory supervision in 3 different jurisdictions. So here are the precautions, example precautions we are implementing. So we segregate the customer account from our own funds, so we are not allowed and we can't abuse the customer funds for our operation. And then also we have insurance on customer assets by partnering with one of the biggest insurance providers in Japan. And then we do use third-party screening for transaction monitoring and KYC, so that we can avoid sanctioned people or some other criminal activities. And regarding the new listing of the new coins, we also do have proper due diligence and following our internal rules, so that not to list random coins, which may have some compliance implication. Anything here in Europe, of course, we need to be compliant with GDPR and so on and so forth. So far I explained about the virtual currency side of bitFlyer business. So finally, I would like to introduce a bit about our blockchain part of business. So bitFlyer is not only a cryptocurrency exchange, but also we are a blockchain service provider. And we do have our own proprietary technology built in-house, which is called EMEA. So we consider blockchain as a new generation of database. And we actually, as a service provider, we offer blockchain as a service. So let me walk you through about the market trends of blockchain technology. So according to the Gartner research, in 2030, the global market, expected size of global market for blockchain is estimated about roughly $3 trillion US. And then there are multiple different fields for this technology to be applied. And for example, like a virtual currency, or like a point or mileage exchange system, or document management and sharing economy, transactions, supply chain management, and so on and so forth. We need to be aware that we are still in a very early stage of the blockchain development. And as a blockchain service provider, the interesting fact we can observe from our projects are, we have actually started from the project, basic project like virtual currency or point mileage exchange, but now evolving towards different use cases such as document management or sharing economy and so on and so forth. And these are the typical use cases of existing projects in the market. So not only financial industry, there are a lot of use cases or existing projects in multiple different industries. So for finance, for example, Amex also are using blockchain and doing the proof of concept projects for international remittance, trade finance, microfinance, crowdfunding. Those are the existing use cases of blockchain. And some of them are on production, some of them are proof of concept stage. But not only those financial use cases. For example, in a real estate company, or like for copyright, and for electronics, for utility bills, those are also, they also have use cases in these fields. So if we talk about our own involvement, we do have a project with one of the biggest insurance provider, MSAD, for their internal operation. And then also we have a project with one of the biggest real estate developer for their real estate rental business. And one of the questions so when we talk about those actual use cases of blockchain, we may receive typical question or even challenge. That is, do those projects really need to be on blockchain? Do they need to be blockchain projects? Why not existing relational database? These challenges or these questions are actually a very fair statement, because in most cases, the existing use cases or projects in the market is actually not necessarily need to be on blockchain. Can be solved with the existing database technology. But let me explain how bitFlyer see the market evolves. We kind of categorize the stage of the development into 4 dimensions, depending on its complexity and then also the level of innovation. So how we see the market at this moment is we are still in a very early stage of the development, which we describe as a step 1 and step 2 here. And step 1 here is a quite simple project. With small complexity of the project and then small, like a low level of innovation. So which is like simply replacing the internal, simple clerical work to blockchain. And using the internal information sharing based on the blockchain and so on and so forth. Do they need to be on blockchain? Not really. But the importance of doing these projects are testing and then get yourself familiarized with blockchain. So that's why a lot of companies come into bitFlyer to test how blockchain works. They all understand that those projects do not necessarily be on blockchain, but at least without starting from somewhere, they cannot understand blockchain and how blockchain works. So we're still in this stage. And then for the second step, this is about like internal coins, coins can be used in the company. And then these can also be recorded on a normal blockchain, normal database. But some companies started using blockchain to create an internal coin. Like for example, one of the projects we are working is with Toyota, obviously one of the biggest car manufacturer. Those companies started to create their own coins which can be used internally. So maybe they will simply distribute those coins to the employee so that they can use it at the canteen, the office. So it's not such a kind of, let's say, exciting project. But if you look for the future, these coins may be able to use across supply chain. So they may be able to start using the coins to settle their trade with other supply chain, with other participants in the supply chain. So that's why they started from these basic use cases. And then what we can foresee for the future is once the arrangements among the industry can be solved, or once those the compliance implications solved, once you can bring a lot of market participants to be onboarded, then there is a possibility to replace the existing network with blockchain. For example, there is a proof of concept project for Zengin network. Zengin network is a banking network among Japanese banks. And they are actually testing and then learning what is the implication if they want to replace their banking network with blockchains. Of course, it requires a lot of effort, and then also, which may also require some change in the regulatory framework. But if you look at the future, this is still possible. And then the final stage, step 4, would be even more complicated project, so-called like a DAO, DAO. So this stage is actually the one we need to, the problem can be solved with this step 4 would be something which blockchain can only solve. And then like a decentralized or autonomous organization, which means that you can run smart contracts and then without involving any centralized authority, you can have any kind of contractual relationship with other market participants, even without knowing them. So imagine that's something like Airbnb without Airbnb, or something like that. And then what Miyabi can do here. So in order for me to explain what Miyabi does here, I would like to explain that bitFlyer is not only technical service provider. We do not only technology itself, but we also offer team to bring the project forward. So in case you want to work on some projects, you do not only need blockchain technology, but you also need a team to work on those projects. So not only R&D team we also have a business team to help you plan the project, and then we also have some project manager to manage your project and so on and so forth. And then based on the plan we create together with the client, and then also based on the R&D we've already done so far, we can provide a tailored product for the specific needs of our clients. And then thanks to those projects we have already worked on, we already have a ready-made solution for typical use cases of blockchain, such as coin solutions or KYC solutions, traceability, and so on and so forth. And these 6 key products are the typical projects we work on, and we already have a ready-made solution, such as coin solutions, ID verifications, electronic contract solutions, traceability, IP management, and open data solutions. These are the kind of typical field where we can use blockchain technology, and then we already have a solution for that. And the typical question we receive is, what is the difference of MIYABI? What is, how your blockchain technology is different from others? So I would like to explain the concept of MIYABI, but before explaining the concept of MIYABI, I would like to, briefly explain how blockchain works. But I'm assuming that most of you are already familiar with blockchain, how blockchain works. So I'm not going to explain the technical details, although it's already text-heavy slides. But what I would like to explain is about the strength of blockchain in general. So since blockchain is based on the distributed ledger technology, so distributed database technology, so the one of the strengths which the blockchain has is a high availability. And on top of that, some key features blockchain has is like impossible to forge. So it is really difficult for someone to force the data stored on blockchain. And then also a Byzantine tolerant, which means that although it is distributed and then public, then anyone can participate in the network. But at the same time, you can maintain the integrity of the data thanks to the characteristics of database, so which is called like a Byzantine tolerant. And also no single point of failure, which means that you don't need to have any single point you need to secure. So there's no single point failure. So these 3 key features are the strengths of blockchain. So the concept of MIYABI is by keeping those strengths of blockchain, and then also we are addressing the weakness of blockchain has. So the major weakness of blockchain are those 3 parts described here. So if you look at the public blockchain like Bitcoin, due to the system of how so because of structure and then technology of how blockchain works, the transactions cannot be finalized. So the technology of Bitcoin is basically, or public blockchain is based on, or is relying on the mathematical probability. So technically speaking, even if you made a transaction, there will be a little chance for the transaction to be overturned, to be changed. So this is one of the weaknesses which blockchain has. And then also, the second weakness is latency. So if you look at the public blockchain like Bitcoin, the transaction you can put in one block or within a certain range of time is pretty limited. If you look at the existing database, or like a payment network of Visa, the amount of transaction they handle is way more bigger than the existing public blockchain can handle. So this is also the weakness. And of course, due to the nature of public blockchain, any kind of information stored on blockchain is public. So even without knowing any confidential information, or you can actually access the information registered on public blockchain. So these are the 3 main weaknesses of existing blockchain technology, or public blockchain technology. So what MIYABI does is, so by keeping the strength of the existing blockchain has, but we also came up with a solution to the weakness which public blockchain had. And then also we are adding even more improvements to the system. So having said that, this is the kind of comparison sheet of our product merely. Then, as I said, we maintain the full strength of the public blockchain as failure prevention, Byzantine tolerance, no single point of failure. By keeping these features same, but our technology allow the transaction to be finalized, which is quite important for financial industry because they can't really say your transaction may be changed later on. Even if it's mathematically almost very likely that your transaction won't be overturned, but it is mathematically not true that there is mathematically a very little chance for the transaction to be overturned. So that's why it is sometimes important for the database to have finality. So this is a key feature we can provide. And then also for the latency and throughput. So we can handle more transaction per second by having a finality. So different blockchains can be used in a different way, but key feature here is some of our features we can provide may fit with some of the projects which especially run by financial institutions. So we can tailor those features to the need of each client's house. So if I describe some of the existing projects we already worked on, as I said, we already worked together with like 3 megabanks, together with Deloitte, as a proof of concept project. But not only that, we are also working for Japan Banking Association, and also a real estate company, Sekisui, and also car manufacturers, and so on and so forth. So although we are not announcing these, we are not doing massive PR for these projects, but we already have a capability to work together with large corporates like banks. So although we do not yet have projects in overseas, but in case there is a demand, we can always talk to those people and discuss about the solutions or projects for blockchain. So these are the brief introduction of our projects and bitFlyer. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Okay, so if you have any questions, please just ask. I will have just one question on myself, so maybe if you could just explain to us what's the process of AML in bitFlyer? How do you check whether, or how do you check the source of the cryptocurrencies that are traded through your exchange?
So the basic KYC and AML we perform is basically the same with other financial institutions. So of course we need to collect the information which can identify that person, and then also verify those by collecting the ID, like passport. But on top of that, we also check and do screening for those names against the publicly available list, or the list we can, I would say, obtain from the third party, such as Thomson Reuters. So we do those kind of screenings in order to avoid onboarding, say, terrorists or someone. inappropriate. So these are the basic things which any kind of financial institution do. Right? But as a cryptocurrency exchange, we also need to somehow secure the source of the integrity of source of funds. So thanks to the nature of blockchain, all the transactions on blockchain can be basically traceable. There are some exceptions, especially for the coins with anonymous feature, but for the coins like Bitcoin, it is possible for anyone to trace those transactions. And there are some service providers in the market which provides an AML solution to those transactions. So we are using those tools to classify the transaction or give the evaluation to those transactions. And those tools can provide you the risk score or how risky those transactions are, so that you can make your own judgment whether you will accept that funds or not. So we will run those transaction analysis or transaction monitoring before we actually credit those funds into the account. And then only when we are happy with the risk profile of those transactions, and then we will credit those into the customer's account. So if we don't do that, then since the transaction on blockchain is public and then not something like on the banking network, so you cannot really identify who sent the money to your platform. So it is very important for the platform like us to investigate the transaction by using any sort of available solution in the market.
Did you just
Well, I have another question. When you are presenting your blockchain, you've mentioned you are able to deal with the requirements of GDPR. But as you already know, actually, there are still discussions within the European Commission on how GDPR and blockchain can be compatible and how you can solve the problem of protecting the identity of the users. And how do you suggest to do that? Especially that we have various jurisdictions within the European Union where the approach towards GDPR or GDPR regulatory bodies is such that basically you cannot use the blockchain solutions because they can be compromised, because the cash transactions can be deciphered, and therefore the protection of the identity is not really possible.
Very interesting and good question, which to be honest, I do not really have an answer to that, because we as an exchange, of course we are compliant with GDPR, because the information handling of our customer information are not on blockchain, because we are using traditional database and of course secured environment without any third-party interference, and we secure those customer information with ourselves, or only to the extent possible, the external party to the extent possible. So if we start using blockchain to store confidential information or personal information, then that is actually a really good question, how we comply with the GDPR. But at the same time, the solution like MIABI, this is different from public blockchain. So this can also be used as public, but the reason why we provide this solution is because from time to time, depending on the nature of the project, we do need to secure the information. We do need to restrict the information to be shared. So by using this private blockchain, we can still restrict the market participants. So simply using blockchain doesn't necessarily mean that that may breach the GDPR compliance. I hope this answers part of your question.
How many inquiries do you have for 2018 in scope of crypto or new coins?
Hi. So how many inquiries did you have in 2018 in scope of new coins on your exchange? And how do you choose them? I mean, do you choose only by the jurisdiction they are from to be compliant, or how do you choose?
So I think you mean like how many inquiries are asking us to list new coins?
Yes.
That's a very interesting question. I would say, if I include any sort of communication which I personally receive once a week, and I do not have exact figure we as a company received a formal request for listing, and we are not the one who list a lot of coins, so we are not really aiming to be a kind of supermarket for coins, because we only list 7 coins so far. So I personally do not have the exact figure for that, but at the same time, how we choose them, we do have our internal criteria and then documented policies. So we will follow this and then make our own investigation, and then we will select the projects we can trust. So this is the basic principle. But in practice, at this moment, we are more focusing on the internal, let's say, operation improvement, or further enhance our compliance operations, so on and so forth. So, but later, yes, we will use these kind of internal procedure to choose the projects we can work on.
You talk about some major implementation of Miami. For example, number 9 was a new customer in a real estate company. Could you provide us with some more details on such use case? What I mean, let's assume I would like to hire you to implement blockchain technology in my company. How this cooperation will look like from a business point of view, and cooperation process and so on.
So for the detail of each project, I do not really have exact information, unfortunately, because I'm mainly handling the European operation of bitFlyer. So I can provide you a brief introduction of the project, but for the detail of each project, let me revert back to you with that's offline, so that I can give you a bit more detailed information. I need to check with our blockchain team for some exact information.
So do you have any other questions? This is opportunity because Mr. Masuda came especially from Luxembourg to us today, so take a chance.
Thanks. Is it possible, in your opinion, in the fourth stage that you explained, for the blockchain to become a customer-to-customer technology, the smart contracts, in example? Because all the things that I'm hearing now are mostly about business to business, but is it possible in the future, in your opinion, to give the end user a possibility to build something simple on blockchain for his personal use, for example?
So, to answer your question, yes, I believe so. But there are some hurdles we need to overcome. For example, as you mentioned, like a simple user interface, user experience. This is really important to penetrate to the mass market for consumer, but which also means that it is also important to mention the fact that consumers cannot really do their audit or due diligence for the technology itself. So which means that many people need to use that service without knowing the technology behind. And then as we can see from the some incidents which already happened with smart contracts, like the project, if you do not understand the project and if you do not understand the code behind, then you may lose your money. But it is impossible for consumers to fully understand the coding and then do the investigation for that. It is not realistic. So which means that we need to onboard some other third-party experts to do their audit. So these are the kind of, how to say, arising the service. I'm already aware of some few service provider who do the coding audit for the project. So although we do need some additional service or solution to overcome some existing problems, but for the future, yes, I do believe so.
Have any company that you know thought about something like driver lessons for creating a smart contract? Like the lesson that you have to get before you start to create any or join any smart contracts, such a jurisdictional, let's say, way of having, because there is a problem with people that do not understand what they are doing and that they can hurt themselves or others. So what, in your opinion, for example, the company or the government should do about it?
I see. So I think your question is, what is the solution against, how do you say? So there may be some people who will simply invest their money without knowing the project, how to prevent this, or how to realize the consumer protection for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good question, and that's why regulation needs to be implemented here. And if we look at the traditional financial institutions, there is a principle. I don't know how to say that in English, but basically you as a regulated financial institution, you're supposed to provide your financial service to only whom can understand what they are receiving, right? And then this should also be applied to this industry, because at the end of the day, this is still a financial service, right? You're not going to sell your investment product to your grandma, 90 years old grandma, right? So that's why I think here is the place where the regulation should come.
Thanks.
Okay, so any other questions? Yes? Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for Mr. Rikiya Masuda for coming tonight. I hope you learned something tonight. And if you have some free time, just please stay with us and let's talk about blockchain technology for a few more minutes. And those that were online, thank you for your attention and see you next time.